Is a building born evil, or does it become so?
Interesting.
Given the chance, would you go back in time and kill baby Cecil Hotel? I know
when
I
it's
would.
on the John.
His little baby potty. Here I am. It's going to be like the end or beginning of Pulp Fiction. This place has, as far as I'm aware, the worst reputation in the entire city.
Yeah.
It wasn't always that way. Well, it kind of was. To understand the Cecil, you have to understand Skid Row first.
Okay.
Skid Row is considered to stretch from Maine to Alameda between 3rd and 7th, covering about 50 blocks. Back in the early days, most of this land was vineyards, most likely of vines related to the vine that was brought over from Spain to the Mission San Gabriel.
And they were haunted.
Listen to that one. Yeah, the haunted grapes. Seasonal workers would come to town to work these vineyards, so short-term housing like hotels and boarding houses started to pop up, and along with that came restaurants, and along with that came saloons and brothels and other places the lonely male workers could indulge in their non-vineyard interests, which...
What else is there? Space?
Space. God's vineyard. Every star is a grape, and we're just swimming in the wine, man. Oh, I'm sauced. I got a snoot full right now. Interstellar hooch. Then in 1888, Southern Pacific's arcade station opened up near 4th and Alameda, so people arriving into town would arrive there and go to the cheap housing that was nearby.
Yeah.
Then the Depression hit, which I
does.
wake up in the middle of the night saying that phrase because we say it so much on this. And people kept coming to LA, showing up at this station looking for work, and that didn't always exist. So a lot of people ended up on the streets around this area. Then in the 1950s, Skid Row had arisen with just a bunch of liquor stores, pawn shops, and god-awful flop houses. Then in the 60s, a lot of cheap hotels didn't meet safety standards, so they were shut down, and even more people got dumped out onto the street, and it was just a cycle that kept dumping on itself more and more until it is what it is today, although now it's starting to change, gentrification. So, with such an environment to be brought up in, can you really blame the Cecil for what it became? Little baby Cecil.
Little baby Cecil.
Cecil was born.
It's got little rat fleas all over it. Because there are a lot of rats.
Not enough, in my opinion.
Oh, here the big debate starts again.
We don't have enough rats in this city. I want more rats. I did not have sexual relations with that rat queen.
It was 7 rats at once. It was like a...
They told me they were all single.
They said they were cool with it.
On December 18th, 1924, the day Star Wars came out,
Oh, boy.
the Cecil Hotel opened up at 640 South Main Street. It was designed by Loy L. Smith and constructed by the Weymouth Crowell Company and financed by W.W. Payton and Associates. Look, I'm giving you information like who constructed it. I give you that sort of thing all the time because you may not care, but maybe you'll spot a connection to something else we've talked about that we didn't notice, and you can let us know. But in the case of the Cecil in particular, there are so many weird coincidences, as the people who work there may call it, that are coming up. I'm just giving you all the clues.
Okay.
And if you connect the dots in a way we can't, more power to you.
Great. Let us know, though, because we're curious.
Oh, my God.
I'm so
Please, I need to know.
Yeah.
So, the Cecil Hotel is born.
Okay.
He grew up real quick. Its name could come from the old hotel of the same name in Alexandria, Egypt, but more likely from the Hotel Cecil that was in London in the late 1800s. It was built at the height limit of the time of 92 feet high, 145 feet wide, and boasted 700 rooms. That number has since been downgraded to 600. They thought 666 rooms was...
Too obvious.
Just lock them up. They're closets. They're not rooms. All the rooms were furnished with locally manufactured furniture made by the Roberts Cohen Company of Huntington Park with a contract from the Barker Brothers. The guys that made Monopoly. This meant over 4,000 pieces of furniture that had to be delivered by more than 100 trucks to the Cecil.
Lord.
The newspaper article of the day said that it was all good furniture or else it would not be used in the furnishings of a hotel of the high class that the Cecil will be.
Predictions are funny.
Originally, it was a sort of high-class place intended for visiting businessmen, but that didn't last long because the businessmen stopped coming there as nicer places started popping up that weren't on Skid Row. It took even less time for the weird stuff to start happening.
Oh, boy.
In 1927, a guest named... You drink some of that eggnog. Hold your loved one close. In 1927, a guest named John Croner stole a diamond hairpin from the Roslyn Hotel and was chased by police and arrested in his room at the Cecil.
Oh, boy.
You know, that's fine.
Yeah, it's a
We've
crime,
all been
though.
there.
Yeah, I mean, diamonds. I mean, come on, I'm diamond hungry.
A diamond are mine and Greg's best friend, and our only best friend.
Don't come to me with none of that gold. It's diamonds or nothing.
That's why they call us Diamond Finger. How about you put a diamond on this finger already? Then, in April 1929, a 33-year-old lady named Dorothy Robertson was wandering outside the hotel for 3 days before someone finally reported it and she was taken to a hospital. Turns out her husband had just died and she tried to kill herself with prescription drugs, but she failed. Or did she? She did. None of this is too scary just yet. It's just a little strange.
Yeah.
The Cecil was just spreading its wings. It was testing the water. Is the city going to put up with me? Oh, yeah.
They let that slide? Really? They didn't shut me down yet?
And keep in mind that the Cecil is next door to the Pacific Electric Building. So while all the stuff in the You're Killing Me Larry episode was going on, so was all of this right next door. So just keep that in mind. Let that taint that episode for you.
All the Southern Pacific guys are at Kohl's like, what's that sound? Murder?
I can't hear you over my horseradish dip on my... Like I said, the Depression hit Skid Row pretty hard, and the Cecil took it right in the face. It became more and more of a flop house, then a businessman kind of place, and more the clientele became transients and people coming there to have affairs or prostitutes using it as their hub. But as rooms were being used for just a few hours, many were also becoming long-term housing, and that bumped things up a notch. In 1931, a 46-year-old man from Manhattan Beach named W.K. Norton went missing from his home. His body was found in a room at the Cecil with a stomach full of poison capsules.
Oh boy.
1932, the yearly offering. 25-year-old man shot himself in one of the rooms.
Wow.
Dead. In 1933, a truck driver got crushed to death against the outside wall of the lobby of the Cecil by, get this, a different truck, not his own truck. 1934, a 53-year-old sergeant in the Army Medical Corps named Louis D. Borden cut his own throat and died in his room at the Cecil.
That is a lot of suicides.
Don't even...
Oh, boy.
Also in 1934, a 19-year-old named Robert P. Kegg was arrested at the Cecil after having robbed 2 other hotels on Main Street. He was planning to rob a liquor store as well when they caught him. How did they know he was planning to rob a liquor store? Had a note in his pocket that said, "You are covered. Open that cash register and shell out. No tricks or else."
Okay.
Signed, the Cecil. Some other notable events there in the 30s. An old man who was living there tried to shoot himself in Westlake, a.k.a. MacArthur Park.
Right.
An old woman who had been living there was found not living, washed up from the ocean on the beach.
Okay.
A guest named George Ford was caught in a sting at the Astor Hotel with $10,000 worth of opium that he had been selling.
That's a lot of opium.
Nah.
Nah. You don't
It's like
much
2
opium.
pods. Come on, here. Have a puff of this.
Smoke this.
Tell me how you feel. Take a skin off.
Euphoric and sleepy.
A lady named Dorothy January was staying there and put out some sort of ad in the paper for a childcare position, and a guy came to her room at the Cecil to answer and ended up accepting the job of choking her and stealing $40 from her purse.
Wow, $40?
Yeah, that's a lot of opium.
From the guy across the hall.
What am I going to give George? One time, a guy in the hotel almost died drinking from a bottle of poison liquor that had killed 3 others, although I'm not sure if those 3 died in the hotel or not. One guy who was living there got killed in a gunfight with his childhood best friend, who happened to be the bartender at the nearby Waldorf Cellar.
Wow.
In 1939, there were no Alcoholics Anonymous groups in LA, so a woman started one up to try to help her alcoholic husband. Most of the people who were in this group ended up relapsing, but the next year, a guy named Mort came to town. He put a feather in his beer bottle and he called it Alcoholics Anonymous. He got the names of all the people from the meeting the previous year and tried to get it going again. He chose as the venue for their meetings a room at the Cecil Hotel in March 1940. There were about 10 men in the first meeting, but the group kept going, and eventually a member of this group named Sybil became the first woman in AA to get sober in the West.
Cool.
So the Cecil hosted LA's first regular AA meetings.
Hey, look at that. That's not bad.
Now let's talk about the jumpers.
Please.
So many people have jumped off this building that many of the long-term residents refer to it as the suicide. The first reported incident is from 1937 when 25-year-old Grace E. Magro jumped off the 9th floor, ripped down telephone wires as she fell, and died in the hospital.
My God.
Her boyfriend was asleep in the room at the time and had no explanation as to why she would jump. Next up, 1938, a Marine fireman named Roy Thompson spent a few weeks in the Cecil and checked out through the window and ended up dead on the skylight of the building next door.
Wow.
Here we go again. On October 22nd, 1954, a 55-year-old named Helen C. Gurney, who had been living there a week in room 704, jumped out of the window and landed on the marquee. She had checked in under the fake name Margaret Brown. On February 11th, 1962, 50-year-old Julia Frances Moore jumped out of the 8th floor and landed in a light well on the 2nd floor.
My God.
Then 1 month later, 27-year-old Pauline Otten was staying there while separated from her husband Dewey. On October 12th, she went to his work to try to reconcile, but he came over later in the day to talk things over. He stepped out for dinner, and when he did, she stepped out for dinner out of the 9th floor window and landed on 65-year-old George Giannini, who just happened to be walking by.
He was a transient.
At first, police thought they had jumped out the window together because they were just so, like,
yeah, they
looked like one
in a
person.
big knot. Yeah.
But his hands were still in his pockets and his shoes were still on. Apparently, a fall from that height, it'll knock your socks off. You should try it. This isn't just a habit from the past, though. This past June of 2015, a 28-year-old man jumped out of a window at the Cecil and landed on the pavement out front. They claimed he was not a guest, but simply trespassed inside for the purpose of killing himself. In case I didn't clarify, all the people who jumped are now dead. In 1995, a murderer named Eric Reed escaped from jail in Castaic and was found in the Cecil. In 2010, this one's weird, a day before he was set to receive the award for Paramedic of the Year, Charles Anthony McDougall responded to a call at the Cecil. He went up to examine somebody while his partner waited downstairs. 8 minutes passed, and his partner went up to check on McDougall, only to find him lying on the ground, stabbed and bleeding. There was no sign of any attacker, and no suspect was ever found.
Oh my God.
There's still no explanation of this, but it seems the things I read, it kind of felt like it had something to do with like a prostitute or a mistress or something.
Okay.
I don't know what happened. It was me. I like to stab paramedics. Who's going to help them?
That's what's funny about it.
Performance art people. There have been reports in the hotel of hearing loud televisions being played when the TV volumes were not loud at all. In January 2014, there was that picture that looked like somebody jumping out of a 4th floor window. The guy who took it said he had nightmares after taking it. Both ghost hunters and ghosted adventurers have been there. There are just the everyday constant calls of domestic and narcotic abuse at the hotel. Just your regular Skid Row sort of thing.
Stan Main.
It is believed to be the hotel that inspired the Raymond Chandler short story Nevada Gascar. It's his kid's short story.
It's only giraffes, though, and it's kind of boring.
The gamblers like to move it. In 2007, the hotel was bought by a group of buyers for $28.5 million with the intention of converting it all into a tourist hotel and renaming it the Pearl because the world is your oyster, and oysters are a good way to shake off bad reputations. However, there is a city ordinance that says if you get rid of long-term housing, you have to provide replacement homes for the people that you're displacing. So the new owners decide to get around that by suing the city over getting their designation as a long-term housing establishment changed. Then a group of long-term residents who had been living there for 10, 20, or 30 years sued the new owners for trying to drive them out of the building. Then part of the group of the owners sued the leader of the owners for misleading them about the building having this designation when they bought it. While all this was happening, the hotel started to get remodeled, and the tourist hotel portion of it opened up as the Stay on Main, which now occupies floors 4 through 6 and is heavily marketed toward European travelers who don't know any better. They renovated the lobby really nice to lure people in, but the rooms are still horrible apparently. During some of the renovations, roaches started flooding out of the walls.
Oh no.
Discouraged by all the lawsuits and the roadblocks, in 2010, the new plan was to turn the Cecil entirely into low-income housing with 384 rooms for people just off of the street, 75 affordable apartments, and 75 market-rate apartments. But the street is trying to gentrify, so this plan was shot down by 2014, people pointing out that there's already over 3,000 units of low-income housing in the area and was going against what the area is trying so hard to do, which is essentially push out the poor and the homeless.
Especially that spot there. Like Main and 6th and 7th. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. It worries a lot of the people that have been living in the Cecil for decades because they're just not as sexy as European backpackers. The way things were settled is that now the Cecil is classified as a residential hotel with about 300 residential units and 138 stay-on-main rooms. However, after the Elisa Lam incident, which we'll get to, they really started pushing the place as the stay-on-main rather than the Cecil, understandably so. They even changed the marquee outside. In this sense, the Cecil is a perfect encapsulation of where downtown is right now, like half trying to be a great wonder of gentrification and half the scariest place on earth. Ever since it was revealed that the Cecil is the inspiration for the current season of American Horror Story, Hotel, tons of people have actually been wanting to stay there willingly. The true American Horror Story is that the Cecil really isn't the only of its breed in the area. Places like the Alexandria and the Roslyn, they've been catering to similar crowds for a really long time as well, so who knows what horrors have been going on there